Jai Shri Ram. This is a GRE AWA issue prompt, which means an essay writing topic. Some time back, I remember posting this, but I didn't give a detailed talk on this. Now, if you are a GRE aspirant, you could be having to write an essay on this. And even otherwise, if you are interested in improving your critical thinking abilities, this is a nice topic. In fact, all GRE topics are very interesting. Most people prefer restrictions and regulations to absolute freedom of choice, although they would probably deny such a preference. So if you have to write a nice essay, you have 30 minutes and no stipulation, but at least 300 to 400 words should be possible. And first you have to take a decision whether you agree. And my suggestion is never fully agree, because all these are moot topics. Moot means uncertain, debatable. So, now you have to ask yourself a few questions. Whenever you're writing, whenever you're talking on any debate topic, remember, this world is a world of relativity. There are hardly any absolutes. So everything is debatable. In Hinduism, we strongly believe that what is right in one situation is wrong in another. Whereas in other religions, they have these commandments which make absolutely no sense. Because if I look at their commandments, it will take me just a few minutes to ridicule them. I can come up with innumerable exceptions where those commandments have to be ignored. Well, anyway, I'm proud to be a Hindu because critical thinking comes naturally to a Hindu. Right. Now, most people prefer restrictions and regulations to absolute freedom of choice, although they would probably deny such a preference. What are the positions we can take? Who, what, where, when, why, how? Who, what, where, when, why, how? Is a set of useful men whom you can use to generate questions and then try answering that. Who would think like this? Who won't think like this? What does this really mean? What is the deeper meaning here? And where do you think that this would apply? And when does it apply? Who, what, where, when, why? Why should we do this? In fact, why should we do this? And also, why shouldn't we do this? And when should we do this? And when shouldn't we do this? And how? How do you go about analyzing this? So I've just generated a few questions, and now, keeping these questions in mind, I'm going to write an essay. Now let me see what is the position I would like to take. Of course, if I'm writing an essay, to score well, I will obviously in my introduction say that this is a moot topic. The speaker's statement that most people prefer restrictions and regulations to absolute freedom of choice, although they would probably deny such a preference, is debatable, and therefore one cannot accept it in toto. In toto is a Latin phrase. In toto means in totality. So my first sentence itself is as good as my introduction. There's nothing more. If I want to say something more, I can start with, in other words, most people, how shall we start? People have their own, likes and dislikes and preferences, and some would boldly assert them, while others might deny their own preferences. And there might be some people who could be doing the same, that is, assert them in some situations but deny them in another situation, simply because the situation has changed. And all these are perfectly defendable. Right? So that's my introduction. Now, my first paragraph. Let us now examine examples which support the speaker's position, which is that people prefer restrictions to absolute freedom of choice, but they would deny such a preference. Why would people do that? The first question we should be asking ourselves is, why would people do that? Well, people would do that because they want to come across as very liberal-minded, and charitable, freewheeling thinkers. So that is the image they would like to portray about themselves. Full stop. A good example could be a politician. Now, a politician could invite fresh members into his political party, and though deep down he prefers restrictions and regulations, he would probably wax eloquent on how he and his party believe that young people should be given the freedom of choice to experiment, and so that they can make some useful contributions without feeling the tyranny of some kind of dictatorship. So this is a party that welcomes all young people, where they will get the freedom they want, and then pursue whatever lines of action they think are good for the country and for the state and for the nation, and blah blah blah. That is how a politician would go. And perhaps after joining this party, some young people may realize to their dismay that the politician seemed to be lying. He said there will be absolute freedom of choice, but once you get inside, you realize there is no freedom at all. Forget absolute freedom of choice. Full stop. And then still the leader could be a good man, for the simple reason that perhaps you are abusing your freedom of choice, and therefore your freedom has been limited. While there could be some members in the same party who are mature enough not to abuse the freedom that they get, therefore they may not be having any sanctions imposed on them. Full stop. You can actually write 2 paragraphs. Here is a situation where some people are getting the absolute freedom of choice, but they are the kind of people who don't abuse their freedom, and therefore the leader entertains them liberally and gives them full discretion to do whatever they want. But at the same time, there could be other members in the other cadre in the political party who might be immature, but they are there in the party for the simple reason that they are competent. Had they been full stop, had they not been competent, probably they would never have been accepted or co-opted into the party. Co-opt, C-O-O-P-T. Co-opt means to appoint a member to a team or select in an interview or something like that. So, these people, you yourself can imagine being a leader. Would you give freedom to somebody who is efficient and effective, he does good work, but perhaps doesn't have the maturity and therefore would probably abuse the freedom that is given? Therefore, you would retain that individual in the team, but you would not give him too much freedom. Whereas there could be another member who is very mature and he doesn't abuse the freedoms that he is given, and therefore perhaps you would not impose any restrictions on that person. Full stop. Next paragraph. Now, from the above discussion and analysis, we can see that many high-performing companies will reflect this kind of a work culture, where freedom of choice exists only for those people who are mature, not to abuse their freedom and bring losses to the company, or even sometimes, cause disrepute to the company. Full stop. Now, next paragraph. So, we can examine some more examples of the exact opposite. There could be some people who prefer restrictions and regulations to absolute freedom of choice, and they would probably never deny that preference, which means that they would also say that we will impose restrictions and regulations, and you have to live up to the discipline that we expect of you. Full stop. Suppose the person is joining the army. This is exactly the situation he will encounter, where the commander, the general, the captain, the lieutenant, all of them will impose restrictions on you. You cannot have an army if there is absolute freedom of choice. Absolutely no question. So you need to have a high degree of discipline. High performing teams also will require people to display a high level of discipline. Therefore, absolute freedom of choice will completely ruin the team effort. Now I think I've gave you enough examples, right? So you can go on exploring, work out the permutations and combinations, write a good essay. Your conclusion should be a paraphrasing of the introduction. Jai Shri Ram.